our kaupapa as navigators, we try to be the ama to the waka, which is our kids and our whānau. So we don't try to sail that waka for them. We don't tell them how to steer it and where to go. We just add it on to that waka, and we're with them walking that path or sailing that journey with them, to awhi, support, tautoko, maybe be the devil's advocate, but really to journey with them, and in so doing develop the relationship that not only benefits hopefully them, but it also benefits us as well, which is an added bonus.
Jon, look, we've had a wee chat before we've kicked off the record button. I firstly want to thank you, my friend, for joining me, and I have to acknowledge our email trail, which was, I got put in touch with you, talking a bit about breathing, and then all of a sudden I changed tack and I'm like, you got to come on my podcast. And I think, what was your thing to me? Holy hecka, I thought that was hilarious. But I'm pretty big into seizing the moment. We talked a bit about that.
Sure.
And the moment is to try and get someone's time. And so you've offered me that tonight, and I'm very much appreciative of that. Jon, where do you fit in this world? I mean, I also acknowledge to you that I haven't heavily researched you, but I do know that you're part of I Have a Dream. And I thought maybe if you could give us just a background firstly on what I Have a Dream is for our audience watching and listening, and where you fit in that little beautiful universe.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity, and awesome to meet you, and awesome to be a part of this podcast. As I mentioned to you, I'm a podcast virgin, so you've deflowered me. So should I thank you for that?
Yeah. You should.
But yeah, I Have a Dream. So we're a charitable trust. I Have a Dream's been in existence since the early 2000s. It was set up by a philanthropist, a Kiwi guy called Scott Gilmore, who worked in the States for a number of years, which is where he came across the I Have a Dream kaupapa. It's huge in the States, and is based around mentoring and supporting kids from disadvantaged communities and getting them into college and supporting them through college. So Scott made some money by selling up a few software companies, came back to New Zealand and decided that he wanted to do something similar. And he bumped into our former CEO now, Ant Backhouse, who was basically doing what I Have a Dream is doing now, but he was doing it off his own back as a volunteer. So it was the meeting of two hearts, I guess you could say, community-minded guys with a passion for helping others, and particularly youth and their whānau. So they ran a pilot for 8 years where Ant worked with a cohort of about 80 kids, mainly from the Mount Roskill area, and he followed those kids through their education journey, starting in, I think it was around year 5 or 6, which is sort of standard 4 in the old money, and he followed them through till they completed high school and went on to do great things with their lives. So there was some great success to come out of that. At that time, Scott and Ant engaged, I think it was Massey University at the time, to track their kaupapa and do some research. And at the conclusion of that pilot, such were the results. The main, suggestion or main thing that came out of the research for them was that, great program, great results, but to be significant in a greater way, needs to be rolled out to a greater number of people. So they set about looking from the top to the bottom of New Zealand, talking to a number of schools and principals and city councillors I think pretty much anyone who would listen to them, their idea was to see what change they could make in a community. And so they settled on Tikipunga in Whangarei, which is where I live. So now we're working in 4 kura in Tikipunga, 3 primary schools, Totara Grove, Tikipunga Primary and Te Kuro Tangarei, and a high school which goes from year 7, which is Form 1, all the way up to year 13, which is Tikipunga High School. So the kaupapa is each year group from year 3 onwards is assigned a navigator. So I'm a navigator, and I started in 2017 with a group of with all of the year 3 students in the 3 primary schools. So fast forward 3.5 years, I'm with that same cohort of kids across those 3 primary schools, but I'm now the year 6 navigator. So I've known these kids for 3.5 years, and at the end of this year, beginning next year, I will be the year 7 navigator, and I'll pick up with the same group of kids that have then gone on to start their intermediate school, high school journey in Tikipunga High School. And so each year we have a year 3 navigator that starts, and the idea is to follow those kids through to year 15 is what we call it. So that's at least 2 years post-secondary school.
Wow. So this is just, I'm trying to find the right terminology, kind of like unequivocal support, just like, or how we talk about some things in life where unconditional love. That's what that is, isn't it?
It is. Ant coined a phrase which we use often. So our kaupapa as navigators, we try to be the ama to the waka, which is our kids and our whānau. So we don't try to sail that waka for them. We don't tell them how to steer it and where to go. We just add it on to that waka, and we're with them walking that path or sailing that journey with them to awhi, support, tautoko, maybe be the devil's advocate, but really to journey with them, and in so doing develop the relationship that not only benefits hopefully them, but it also benefits us as well, which is an added bonus.
Jon, what's it like having that, in modern times, I guess, because, sorry, I'll track back a little bit. It feels like what you're saying is something that humanity has kind of built in to we all look after each other together, because that's what for most of time was necessary, that there wasn't us and them, there was those of us, and we all had to kind of progress forward. In this world, what you're saying feels a little bit like, where does that fit? Whose job is that? And why, but what's it like kind of having that as because I don't want to say the word burden, but gosh, it is an important role. You have limited room for error because you've got life in your hands, if you know what I mean. And I'm guilty of making things a bit more dramatic than they need to be, but hopefully you understand the sentiment, No,
I think I do, and I think I hear where you're coming from. And yeah, you're right. Just to go back to your first comment, I think back in the day, it was everyone's job to look after everyone. And another one of our sort of our lines, our whakatauki, is that it takes a village to raise a child. And that was definitely the case as I was growing up, possibly as you were growing up. I'm 58. And, in most neighbourhoods around New Zealand, everybody knew everybody, and no one locked their back doors or their front doors. No one locked their cars. If you were down the corner of the street and doing something that you shouldn't have been doing, someone would have pulled you up on it, and the word would have got back to your mum or your nan, and you would have got a jandal or a something as a result of that. And that's kind of what I think made New Zealand what it is. But with as our society has evolved, I think we've become more insular. Whānau, the extended whānau model is still there, but I guess we're more isolated as individuals and families in our neighbourhoods. And so our kaupapa really is to try to be, as navigators, to try to be another significant adult for some of our dreamers, as we call them, perhaps the only significant adult in their life. And for others, it's an extra significant adult. So there's a great responsibility. You're absolutely right. Certainly what keeps us, as I Have a Dream, navigators on track are our organisational values.
Yes.
What keeps me on track as a navigator and as a father, I've got 5 kids of my own, are my own personal values. And these are things that have evolved over time. But the older I get, the more convinced I am of their importance and their worth, for keeping not just me on the path that I want to be on and the direction in my life, but also my whānau, and also for my wider whānau, which is our I Have a Dream kids. So we're value-based. They're not just words that are, in a frame on a wall somewhere that's getting dusty. We all live our organisational values daily. We talk about them often. And for me, there's a kind of a second layer which relates to the values, but is to me the default, which are basics, or what I regard as basics around manners and respect. And they tie into values as well, but I was brought up with the, yes please and no thank you, and looking people in the eye when you're talking to them, and respecting elders regardless of whether they've earned your respect. You just give it anyway because they're older than you, and all of that kind of old school stuff, which is still evident in some sections, I think, of our society, but certainly in communities that are not so different to the communities that we're actively involved in, they're missing, or the volume on those values and those sorts of attitudes has been turned way down low. So we're there to just try and awhi that whole whanaungatanga, rangatiratanga community kind of vibe and spirit.
Brother, I love it so much. So how it works is we'll go to a short break. I mean, for us, we'll just click straight over to the next bump. But for everyone else, they'll go to the ads, and this is a little community channel. So watch the ads, team. Everyone needs to survive. And for the audio listeners, I'll jump in and do a little bit of talking. But when we come back, Jon, I would absolutely love to. Well, maybe for another part of the segment is to break down what those ethics are you talked about. Sometimes I think in life we hear it, it makes sense, but we forget to say, what exactly did you mean? And so I'd love to revisit that. But in the next segment, bro, I'd love to go back to when you were the age of the children that you helped navigate, and to talk a little bit about what was life like for you then. So stay with us, team. Be back with Jon in just a sec. Okay, Jon, we made it back after those lovely little ads. So before the break, we talked a wee bit about, ethics, and I guess I'll say on this podcast, I often kind of call out buzzwords, even though I love the idea of mindfulness, I'm very critical when you say to someone, be mindful, because it's like telling someone to just find love. Really? Do you understand the burden that comes with? And just be happy. Why can't you be happy? Well, because happiness is sometimes, it's this wave we all ride. And when I what helps me put it into context is things like, well, what's your ethics on life? What will you do and don't do? And what do you do consciously and unconsciously? And trying to understand those. So some of the podcasts I'll have different neurologists and scientists and just break it down. And I classify you in that, people who spend a lot of time thinking about, what is the meaning behind the word? So it's difficult because I make it really big really quickly. But when you talk about ethics and layers, what do you mean? Like, what's the hierarchy which you put your kind of, how do you keep your head screwed on straight, if you like?
What got me to where I am, or probably a little bit before that, we've lived in Whangarei. I've lived in Whangarei for 13 years. So prior to that, lived most of my life in Auckland. Met my wife in Auckland. We've been together for 16 years. And so prior to meeting her, it was probably just good luck that got me to where I was. And from then on, it's kind of been a definition of luck that I've always liked is it's a combination of preparation and opportunity. So I spent a number of years, preparing, and opportunity came along, opportunity to meet the woman of my dreams, to get married, to move to Whangarei, which is where she was from, to then, have 5 awesome kids, to own a gym. We set up a gym and a physio clinic to own that, to learn some lessons from that, to have then given that all away, and to now be working for I Have a Dream. So probably the biggest, buzzword or value, the one that I use many times a day is whakawhanaungatanga. And Joby Hopper, who I've mentioned to you, who's he's a jack of all trades for our organisation. What he doesn't know about te ao Māori and tikanga and those sorts of things, to me, probably isn't worth knowing. But he says that, or he said to me one day, that whanaungatanga isn't something that's done necessarily. It's a lifestyle. And so even this kōrero that we're having and what got us to this point, it's whanaungatanga. We're whānau. It's having the courage or the curiosity or the inquisitiveness to ask, and to be responded to in the way that you would want to be responded to. And again, I think back in the day, that was kind of how we rolled. Society was life was a lot more simple. There weren't as many dangers out there. And so I think there was a level of trust and faith and belief in our fellow person that, again, given where we are now, it exists, but in sort of small pockets.
Yes.
And sometimes has to be teased out. And so whanaungatanga is a big one for me. I try to live it every day, like I said. And that extends not just to me, or is in relation, not just to me, but it's my wife, it's our whānau, it's the way that I relate to my colleagues at work, it's the teachers in the school that we work with, it's whānau that I might have a text kōrero with, or might see as they're picking or dropping off or picking up their tamariki from school. It's everybody, it's all around us. And so I just try to be how I would want to be, received and responded to.
Yeah, bro.
Doesn't get much more complicated than that for me.
Well, and look, I love it that, and I would bet a lot that there's no other television talking like we are, because it has to be, there's this modern part in us, right? I believe that needs to make it complicated and branding, it's like, oh, there's a secret algorithm, but there isn't for things like the pursuit of trying, In fact, it's scary if you look at it, because growing up, watching many movies and trying to say, why do I love these 80s films like Indiana Jones and Rocky, because they're, all of these people are scarred. They're the ones that no one really wants to be around because they're so something this or that. They're broken, but they keep coming back. They give us this hope, and then when we get to real life, you're not allowed to have any of that. You're not allowed to be the Rocky. You have to be well prepared, well liked, and I think the truth is that most of us would love it if we could just say, look, it's okay to not be the perfect person. It's a leap of faith to not try to be this angelic, especially today, right? Because you can get in trouble for saying the wrong things online, and it might not have been your intent.
Yeah, no, and there's another element there, that sort of springs from what you just touched on, and that's as men on there, because in terms as far as other societal taboos go, we can't be sensitive. We can't be shown to have feelings. We can't express our love for, our love for our wahine toa, let alone the beauty of a sunset or, the majesty of a kauri. We can't cry. We can't cuddle our son or our daughter when they fall off their bike. All of those sorts of male stereotypes, which are slowly being broken down, but there's still, a foundation of many communities and many individuals. And so, I try to, when opportunity presents, to sort of push back against those sorts of stereotypes as a male, as a man, both with my own kids and also in the schools, that we work in, with the dreamers that I work with. Something is sort of innocuous, but equally as sort of powerful as another side to that coin. And it comes up time to time. Someone will say a year 3 or 4 or 5 tamarika will say that, pink isn't a girl's colour, or pink is a girl's colour, I should say. And I'll just jump on that and, bro, I love pink. Pink's an awesome colour. There's no such thing as girls' colours and boys' colours. It's a colour, come on. And little things like that. So, like I said, it's not rocket science, but I guess in this fast-paced world where everybody has a voice, and it's really easy for the disenfranchised or the extremist type viewpoints to kind of get a voice and get support. There's just a lot of noise, I think, in it, and it rather than helping, I think it sort of hinders us in a lot of ways.
It sure does, and kind of unconsciously, like I think about bring up television media, it is always the sensationalism that. Like our conversation will be very logical. So where does that fit when you try to sell it? That's part of the reason why it's on so late. But I do know that the audience that we will touch is ready for that, right? It's not in prime time sometimes that you're trying to put in the good stuff. That just fills the cup of the anxiety, the fear, and that will manifest itself in its own way. But the goodness takes time. It's like a navigator. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Yeah. I'm here when you need me. I'm here. You can rewatch this stuff. So
yeah, and it's planting seeds. It's planting seeds, and we don't know what seeds will germinate and which ones will. But there's another part of it for me, and I say this, have said this a number of times. Change is it's inevitable, and a lot of people don't like change. But change for me comes back to it's a joke about changing a light bulb and how many psychologists it takes to change a light bulb. Have you heard that one?
No, but please take me there.
how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Well,
How many?
it actually only takes one psychologist, but the light bulb has to really want to change. And so it's kind of funny, and most people react how you've reacted. But there's a lot of truth to it, because, and I know it from my own experience, that we can have any type of movie star or influencer or footy star, or internet TV, guru talking to us non-stop about what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. But until such time as the person who those messages are geared towards is actually prepared to take those on board, and they're at a point in their life or their day where they want to make that change, I think the best we can do is to just keep putting it out there. And like the seeds, some will sprout, and hopefully more than one will, go on to become a mighty kauri.
Yeah, bro. I tell you why I love that, just before we go to the break, because you're acknowledging the fact that sometimes, more often than not, it doesn't work out. But we're betting because you gotta keep trying to get that one to come through, right? It is important. And sorry to tie it back to the movies, but that's what I take away from it, that the message is you most likely won't win, which is weird in this world. We want to win. We want guarantees. We want the mortgage, the rent, the nice shoes, the planning forward. That's what COVID taught us. It's all now. You got to stay in here, because there is no future past. It's an invention in some ways. But when you do kind of make peace with that, there's some power. It's 9 o'clock. So, Jon, when we come back from the break, I have never really broken this down, but it's something I've been thinking about for many years. It's this idea of what is a dream. And I think that most people think a dream is a dream, but I'm not sure you're given that from birth. I think it's a gift to dream. And I'll kind of, maybe after the break, I'll articulate a bit my thinking, and then please jump in. So stay with us, team. Back with Jon in just a second. Okay, Jon. So before the break, talking a little bit about dreams, let me just set this up. So I was watching a Netflix documentary one time, and I think it was a neurology thing. They were talking about how the brain works and all this type of stuff. One of the case studies is they went to India, and they were talking about, I think it was a 12-year-old looking after her sister. The parents were sick and all these things. And the reporter said to this young girl, "What do you dream about?" And I don't know if I made this up or I'm retelling it in a way, but from memory, I paused it and I thought, I wonder what the answer is, because that's quite interesting. And I thought to myself, well, maybe it's access to healthcare or money or something like that, right? And I said, I'll see what happens. And I pushed play again. And the little girl actually said, "I don't dream." And I thought, whoa, that was the first time I had ever considered that maybe the reason I do dream is because I was given the time to dream, something like that. And it stayed with me because I'm torn. I would love to think that, it is the dreaming that gets you out of the abyss, if you like, but it might not be. It might be someone ripping you back and holding you until you feel calm enough to be able to dream, or something like that. Have you ever tried to kind of articulate what it is to have a dream?
I haven't, not intentionally anyway, but to sort of tap into what you just touched on, I think, and certainly some, not all, of the dreamers that I work with as a Year 6 navigator, it's not that they don't dream, and I think this applies to adults as well, some adults, and it's maybe the reason why that 12-year-old Indian girl didn't dream was because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's out there. And if our life revolves around the community that we're in, or just our house with our whānau, and we've never been given the permission or the encouragement to look over the fence, or we've never been to the movies, we've never been to town, even. To me, that would influence whether or not you dreamed and what your dreams might look like. And so one of the things that I do on a weekly basis with my after school program, so as I have a Dream Navigators, we spend time in our respective year levels classes through the day, developing an understanding of what their learning day looks like, and just spending time with them, developing that relationship. And we also run after school programs. And so in my after school program since 2017, I always play a short video clip. I call it a wow video. And the way I phrase it to our year 6 streamers is, when I saw that video, I thought, wow. And a range of different things. But the reason for playing that video is to start a kōrero, maybe push back against some thoughts or ideas that they might have already had around whatever that subject or topic might have been, and really just to expose their minds to something that they might not have thought of before, come across before, and maybe just plant another seed. So one of the ones that sticks out for me still was in the first year, 2017, I found a video online, and it was about ferro fluid, I think that's right. So it was this particular type of fluid that NASA developed because they were having problems with their fuel delivery systems in the rockets. I don't know. So anyway, this particular fluid has magnetic particles infused in it. And so if you had a small little beaker type container and you ran a magnet underneath it, the fluid would take different shapes and move, and because of the magnetic field from the magnet. So it was pretty cool, a couple of minutes. And then at the end, one of the first questions I asked, so who's heard of NASA? Who knows what NASA is? And no one had. Right. And that's fine. Year 3, so what's that, Primer 3 kids? But I remember a book from when I was a kid, about that age actually, and it was Vehicles of Flight. And so, as I said, I'm 58, so this would have been, late 60s, early 70s. And it had at the back page had a picture, a drawing, an artist's impression of the space shuttle. So I remember that, and NASA and whatnot. So in something that you and I might take for granted, and NASA, just doesn't feature into some of our kids, frame of reference. So those sorts of little things, I think, again, it's about planting those seeds and exposing our kids, not just our I Have a Dream kids, my own kids as well, to as much as we can, and to not limit their thinking and their view of the world.
Yeah, bro. And look, you raise a really interesting thing, and that word you said, exposure. Isn't it interesting? Because in this current world, this COVID world, exposure is careful. You might be exposed. But we know the immune system needs to be exposed to build an immunity. And I'm absolutely no doctor, but if I just think logically, we're the same too. You had to be exposed to these different things, maybe the good, the bad. And if you don't, like I highlighted to you in the beginning of our chat, you end up being a 20, 30, nearly 40-something who's having to backtrack and find more exposure, which includes weekly conversations with people, trying new things, having a wife who says, man, I believe in you, but I hope one of your ideas works out one of these days. So there is this idea, like, don't want it to be not so secure, because it's and I think the interesting thing about that is there's some research on that too. There's a professor I had from America joined me on the podcast, and he says a lot of the world now we've kind of tucked children away, and so the world's perceived to be more dangerous than it really is. But there's a trust issue there, I guess. But when you do that, you take away the chance for the person, the soul, to develop its infrastructure, to develop its natural ability to deal in the world. And I guess that's, John, maybe where, this is another heavy role for the navigator, is to what's the correct exposure, what's enough to expose but not overwhelm, right? I mean, and I guess it's a feeling.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think the feeling comes from the relationship that we have, the relationship that we develop with our dreamers, the relationships that we develop with their whānau, the relationships that we develop with their teachers. Part of it too, I think, and just to go back to something you said before around finding, something or coming across something, sometimes I think it's actually about finding ourselves. So going back to find ourselves, because I think in this day and age, it's really easy. In fact, it's, to me, it would possibly even be a default, where we're striving to be, because of the influences and the barrage of messages and media that that we're subjected to on a daily basis. It's easy to, I guess, want to be like somebody else without necessarily knowing, well, who I am. So that's a part of it as well. Being confident in our own skin, being confident in the lives that we lead. And as I'm talking, I'm thinking, and to go back to, you mentioned happiness before. I've read a couple of articles that talk about happiness being not too dissimilar to the root of all evil. It's something that people feel they should have, that they want it, they need it. But happiness is according to this line of thought, it's fleeting, and so as something aspirational, it's arguably not the best thing to be focused on. Whereas fulfillment, now that's another sort of level, and so if I died in my sleep tonight, I would die a happy man, because I just happen to be happy at this point in time. But more than that, I'm fulfilled with the life that I've led. I've hurt some people along the way, and I'm deeply sorry for that. But since then, I've tried to live my life another way, and I'm deeply fulfilled with my life. And so I think those sorts of elements come into those relationships and come into that kōrero. And I guess determine to some degree, how much exposure or what exposure, because we're not, there's a great American football coach, Vern Gambetta. I think he was around in the 70s. I could be wrong about that. But one of his lines, which I've always liked, was that, and it's to do with sport coaching, but I see myself as a coach. But coaching is something that you do with athletes, not to them. And so as a navigator, I'm not trying to, or we're not trying to get our dreamers to do anything in particular. we're just walking alongside them and giving them the confidence, the support to make mistakes, but to be themselves, to develop some self-awareness and some broader understanding of the world, themselves, their families, and how that all sort of fits. And to hopefully, and this is my dream for my kids and for the Year 6 dreamers that I'm lucky enough to work with, is that they grow up to be awesome people. And if we were all awesome people, I think this world would be a much better place.
Yeah, brother.
There's much bad stuff, but if there were more like-minded people, it sounds a bit cheesy actually now that I hear myself saying it, but to be the best person that you can be. I think, and if you're close to that, then fulfillment has got to be there, and happiness will be there more often than not.
100%. I just 100% agree. And what comes to my mind as we go to the break is that if you want to be a CEO, if you want to be a leader, if you want to be a politician, if you want to be a prime minister, there should be navigators for you too, because there's no way that amount of power doesn't change you, right? And I think we see it time and time again, which I think is the instinct of people saying, it's a conspiracy or this. I think we're saying, don't make it all just you have the power. We know where that goes. Nowhere good. It's supposed to be split and shared and something like that. So stay with us, Jon. We'll come back and we'll have one more crack at going deep with you, brother.
Me.
Well, Jon, look, it always surprises me, but I shouldn't really be surprised, but I am surprised that we didn't start out with a topic. We just went into this and all of a sudden we're like 35 minutes in and, we've covered lots of things. It doesn't make life easier, but it definitely doesn't make it harder either. I like the fact that we get to process it in real time and think, if I died tonight, would I be happy? Because that's a good question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
What do I need to do differently tomorrow? I'm fascinated with this tightrope that we walk in life, which is something like, let's say I want to go after that dream, but it has some risks because I'm not really conditioned to say no to people or take the plunge or take the leap of faith. What is this something you think about, bro? When how strategic are you versus feeling? I mean, are those things able to be separated? How have you kind of navigated? And I really ask that in the sense of bravery to follow through with your convictions. And I really ask it for me, right? I'm at a stage now. I'm 39. It's like, I don't want to be the 49-year-old interesting podcaster guy. I want to have a rocket science of, this is what I believe and this is what I spent the last year studying, last 10 years. So, yeah, man, do you kind of pick up what I'm putting down?
I think I do. And interesting, though, that you mentioned not starting with a topic. I mean, the kind of loose topic was mindfulness and I have a dream. And I think my response to your question would be mindfulness from the perspective of, and it's a massive, what little I know of it, it's a really broad sort of an area, but the thing that I gravitate towards, and as far as mindfulness goes, is that it's about being in this moment, and that the only thing that matters is now. Yep. Because what's happened before is gone. We can't do anything about that. And what's going to happen in the next minute or the next day, well, it doesn't matter because it hasn't happened yet. And that's not to say that you can't dream and you can't plan and all that kind of stuff. But I think by and large is a day-to-day way to live my life, which my wife is frustrated with at times, more often than not, to be fair. But it's about taking each moment as it comes and reacting, I guess, in that moment but also being able to react in a balanced, conscious way, as opposed to a kind of a reptilian, amygdala-like, fight or flight type of way. And so that, for me, is kind of the crux of both mindfulness and of what I try to, or how I try to, spend the minutes, the hours of a working day or a day that I'm at home. It's about approaching each situation on its merits, giving it the attention that your full attention, because that's the attention that it deserves, and making the call or the decision or a comment, in a balanced way, and in a way that is going to uplift and encourage, not diminish and put down. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, man. Look, and sorry to put you on the spot to have the feeling that you have to, but it's just, and again, 100% agree. And it's the tools and the ways, and trying to kind of convince yourself that finding a tool to get you in the now is necessary, because the rest of the, let's say, the commercial world's trying to pull you away, trying to keep you on the device, trying to keep you listening to the podcast, trying to keep you looking everywhere but just here. And I get it sometimes why having adventures in your mind is fun, but there is a certain discipline, which I think is maybe what you referenced back in the day. You listen to the elder because that was that. And it kind of wasn't about acknowledging that they're right. It was acknowledging that you're probably not more right as the youngster, and to just button it down, which is, something that I brought through into the podcast. It's not blow my mind, it's please. I go with the first word that often gets overlooked is the acknowledgement of please, because it's definitely, we're too much of statements now, eh? Do this, do that, be on time, global warming, everything. Don't you do this? And I guess that's kind of just this interesting little bit here, which we're trying to not work out, but work through, is what's the right balance. And one of the things, John, I've kind of thought through over this podcast with you is, I kind of maybe hinted at the fact that there's a bit of a burden or a lumping of responsibility. But the beautiful thing is, and it's incorporated in your timeline with the youngsters, is that it's not about you getting it right overnight. This is a journey. And so there's something beautiful about, well, look, we can talk in days, hours, but we can talk in weeks and years as well. Yeah. And so there's not a lot of time, but enough time, more than the world gives you for, being a doctor, so you kind of have that too, which I think takes a bit of the immediate pressure away, because if I said to you, tomorrow you better get it right, and you've got a child's life in your hand, that's like, ooh, there's really,
yeah. No, I agree, and I think there, even you talked about, or you mentioned neuroscience earlier, and what I know about neuroscience, isn't worth knowing. But one of the few things that I do know is, that our brain doesn't actually isn't fully developed till around, I think it's the early 20s, 22, 23, when our sort of brain development is, I guess, it's still plastic, but it's more fully rounded and more fully formed. And so up to that point, some of the decisions that we make are, they turn out pretty good. And some of the decisions that we make in that time, in our up to, or maybe even through our early to mid-20s, they can perhaps be not so good. But it's all predicated on time on the planet, I guess. And the longer we're here, hopefully the more we learn, and the wiser we become. And again, to me, that wisdom that comes with time, it can't be fast-tracked. It can't be something that you learn in a weekend, in a weekend course or a Tony Robbins book or whatever the case may be. No disrespect to Tony Robbins or weekend courses. If those things spin your wheels, then, payana. But I think most of the rest of it, it's something that evolves over time. And I think, as a race, that's how things have been for us, since day dot. And so it's about, for all of us, I think, but again, talking about our dreamers, it's about being with them, developing that relationship, that friendship, if you want to call it that. And from that, the knowledge and the understanding that comes from that, it's letting people experience what it is that they want to experience. But if they're on the cusp of, perhaps a not so wise decision, or they've made a less than appropriate decision, being able to reflect on that or to pause and think about the merits of what that decision might or the implications that decision might bring. So it's just, I guess, adding another, like I said at the beginning, another significant adult. That might be that, that good voice on one shoulder.
That's it.
May or may not, counteract the, the not so good voice that's on the other shoulder, or something along those lines.
Yeah, bro. No, it's beautiful. And look, we're talking so deep now that it's going to be hard to compact into this logical talk. But I know I heard something the other day about a diver stuck under his in a shark cage, ran out of air, was about to take that last gulp, and they said, "Why didn't you?" And he said, "Well, a picture of my dog entered my mind, and all the feeling was I got to get back to that dog." And it wasn't anything like a Tony Robbins statement. No disrespect to Tony, maybe just a little. I mean, come on, man, sponsor this podcast. But but it was the simple thing. And I wonder if it's the Navigator. Come on, we're here for you. We're here for you. So if there is that one moment where you're in that fight or flight, it might just be like, oh, John wouldn't be very happy if I did this. And how cool is that? That might be it, and we'll never know, but at least it's a chance, right? And I think what I'm taking away is, man, like you said, it's a long game, but you got to stay in it. And we've got to tell everyone every opportunity to stay in it. And it's not logical. It's something about the tension between, fear, love, hope, anxiety, past, present, future. And it's so complex that all I can feel is you got to be around someone else or the feeling that you'd want to be. And if you haven't got that, just keep in it. Like do what the Rocky movies say. He wasn't supposed to remember. He had the eye, the coach and his wife, but he kept in it. And we all got to keep in it too. So that's the dream for me, is that, maybe it's all a jumble at the end of the podcast, but there's something in there, eh? There's something we're talking about that is too big to put your finger on.
It's too big, but by the same token, it's actually really, really simple, I believe. And I think sometimes where, the disconnect happens is that it can't be that simple. It must be something else.
Yeah.
And of course, in this day and age, there's 50 million influencers telling us that it is something else. And so if we don't, again, know who we are, what we like, what we don't like, what we think, what we don't think, and most of the people around us are similar, it's easy to get sort of swayed or pulled over here or over there. But yeah, I could be wrong, but I don't think it gets much more complicated than this. And what do I know? But like you say, it is the long game, and Whakatauki that I collect various things. Whakatauki is one of them. And I say it from time to time, this morning I opened 2 gifts. I opened my eyes. And, each day truly is a gift, because when you and I woke up this morning, many people in our country, let alone the world, they didn't wake up. So we're straight away, we're streets ahead of where those people that didn't wake up were. And so, the best we can do is to treat this day with the respect and the humility that it deserves, and to treat everyone that comes into our lives or that is a part of our lives in this day with the respect and the humility that they deserve, and in a way that we would like to be treated ourselves. And that's it.
That's it, brother. Absolutely beautiful. Jon, if people from around the country or around the world, wherever you're listening or watching, want to check out what you do and the kaupapa behind I Have a Dream, what's the best way to, keep in touch and have a look?
ihaveadream.org.nz is our website. Absolutely feel free to reach out to me direct, Jon, Jon, at ihaveadream.org.nz, email, I'll reach back to you, absolutely, because again, I know what it's like to send emails into cyberspace with all the best intentions or curiosity, and they just spend time gathering cyber dust. So, Paiana, reach out, please do.
And look, I will say to people, everyone's like, oh, no one ever responds. I'm someone who their hobby is to reach out for guests, and the ones you think will never get back to you, you chuck in a little please and a thank you. They always do. So that's my tip too, because these things go a long way. And I think that it's more than we think, a please and a thank you. And it's been around for generations. In some ways, it's probably started and ended wars just with simple manners. But Jon, want to thank you for the work you do, brother. Thank you for taking time with us. Thank you to the I Have a Dream team. And look, I just look forward to many more conversations. One of the things I'm pumped about is we've now archived a bit of your story that gets to be shared going forward, so it's free to everyone, and that's how it kind of should be. All right, team, that's us for the end of this podcast. Jon, thank you again. The computer's telling us it's 9:30, so let's get back to our families.
Cheers,
Cheers, brother. Catch you later.
Awesome. Thank you.